Hey, y'all. Patrick here with Vetted. Thank you guys so much for joining. You saw the title. You saw the thumbnail. Let's jump into this. A leading UFO researcher, Richard Dolan, was recently on a podcast called Camp Gagnon. I think I'm saying that right, with host Mark Gagnon. Gagnon. I don't know. Anyway, he detailed 8 craft that have been recovered from non-human intelligence. We're going to go over 8 of these supposed and alleged UFO crashes, okay? So what he considers, the top ones, all right? So we're going to be going over each one and giving a little more information. So we've got this clip to look at that'll give us some context of these, right? And then let's just read this tweet here, okay? Shout out to Mike Colangelo. Richard Dolan, okay, is extremely confident that the U.S. has non-human craft from at least 10 retrievals, all right? And then he lists 8 of the 10. Number 1, Camp Girardeau, 1941. Number 2, Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. Number 3, Aztec, New Mexico, 1948. Number 4, Kingman, Arizona, 1953. Number 5, Las Vegas, 1962, near Nellis Air Force Base. Number 6, Bolivia, 1978. Number 7, Varginha, Brazil, 1996. Number 8, Peru, 1997. Jonathan Weygand. I'm going to put a link to the full interview, a link to just this clip. And then again, we've got lots of different stuff we're going to go through of each particular, case here. And I've also going to be showing a clip from my interview with James Fox about the Varginha, Brazil incident. Okay. And I'll be putting a link to that too. And I've also got a clip here from Lance Corporal Jonathan Weygand, his testimony about this one in Peru, 1997. So you may have heard of some of these crash sites, and you may not have heard. So you may learn something new. And yeah, let's jump in. Let's go to this clip and get some context, right?
And how confident are you that right now the U.S. government is in possession of non-human spacecraft?
Extremely. I would say, very confident about that.
And from which incidents and which retrievals do you think they possess those craft?
Great question,
Probably at least
Mark.
10.
So probably at least 10. We've heard different numbers, right, from David Grush, different people, right, within this. James Lakatsky. I mean, just depending on who you talk to, we've heard different things there. Mark, just a little backstory. Mark, who's doing the interview here, he is from a show called Flagrant with Andrew Schultz, his comedian. And I do watch that podcast, and it's quite good. And he's sort of a co-host on there, so he's got his own show now. And digging into this, he's been doing some great interviews about UFOs, to be honest with you. So this is a 4-hour interview, well worth watching. All right, let's continue.
I'm going to guess.
Would you mind naming a few specific ones?
Yeah. Definitely Roswell. Roswell was the real deal, in my opinion. That was the real deal. Mm-hmm. We can come back to that if you want. There's an earlier one that I've often thought about. It's not as strong as Roswell, but it's interesting.
So y'all should tell me in the comments what other, famous crash sites like this that aren't included in this list that should be included, you think?
I even spoke very much a number of times to the woman who brought that out, Charlotte Mann. That's called Cape Girardeau, 1941. 41, 6 years before Roswell. It's an interesting case. We're really relying on her testimony, but you got to love Charlotte Mann. She's just a beautiful lady, and I think she's truthful. I really do. There's one interview I saw with her and her sister, and they're talking about their grandfather. Their grandfather was a reverend by the name of Huffman, and he apparently told her, she learned, I think, from her grandmother, not from directly her grandfather, after he had died, that he was brought. There was a crash. It's in Missouri, and was asked to perform last rites on these alien beings. They weren't from this world.
She was asked. Someone asked her to do it?
He was asked. Her grandfather. Her grandfather. So it's her story. And it's not the strongest because it's really just her We don't really have a lot more to go on. So I wonder about that one.
What happened to those beings after that event? Does she specify?
It's not clear.
Did the government come in and
Yeah. The government came in and handled it, but it's not clear if they lived or died. I don't really know.
Wow.
Yeah. The government came in and handled it. So, yeah. You know, it's like saying this stuff like it's just so like matter of fact, right? Like, yeah, of course, that's what happened. The government came in, we know the story.
I don't really know if she knows. But anyway, let's say Roswell, and then less than a year later, Aztec, New Mexico, for sure. That one was people tried to debunk it for years, but no, that's a good one in my
I'm not familiar with that at all. Could you explain it?
So again, we're going to be going over all of these different ones that he's bringing up, all right? We're going to be going over every single one. Not deep diving, just surface, information on all of these.
Yeah. Craft said to be 100 feet diameter came down. This was actually the first UFO crash ever written about.
And what year is this?
1948. A book came out about it in 1950. It was the first ever real UFO book called Behind the Flying Saucers by a guy named Frank Scully. So we think of the X-Files.
Yeah.
Scully, I think that's where they got that from.
Interesting.
But it's actually a really cool book. Scully was a cool writer. He was like on to the criminal nature of the U.S. government back then. Not easy to do in 1950.
Yeah, it wasn't cool yet.
No. Scully was he was all right. But he had come to this story about a crash, and
interesting that he wrote a book about this and not the Roswell, New Mexico one, if that was the very first book ever written.
His own investigation, he consolidated a number of the witnesses into one scientist, which was a composite character. And there was an expose of the book that stated a couple of years later that the people who gave him the information were con artists. And I think that was actually really dishonest reporting by the debunker. There's a really good book that came out about this more recently by two friends of mine, Scott and Suzanne Ramsey. They went into the Aztec crash in better detail than anyone's ever done. And I think they showed, A, the debunking effort was absolutely dishonest and pernicious. And B, that there were some witnesses, there was some information that they were able to acquire that supported this story. And I think they made a good case.
So what exactly happened? A 100-foot aircraft?
100-foot diameter flying saucer goes down, almost virtually intact.
This is New Mexico, you said?
Aztec, New Mexico is northern New Mexico, yeah.
Wow.
And 12 to 16 dead aliens, a bunch, like little guys, supposedly collected wearing like these blue suits, skin fitting suits. Where do they go? Maybe they went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at that time. I don't know if anyone can really know where they went.
And whose account is it from? Who observed it?
Oh man, you're
if you don't know, it's cool. I know you didn't write the book on that one.
I didn't, and I mean,
was it a group of people, or was it like a family? I'm sure this is probably a remote part of New Mexico.
There were several different witnesses from that area.
Got it.
Again, we're going to go over all this.
There was a firefighter, I think, who got on the scene. He talked to people. There were like a handful, not as many as with Roswell. Mm-hmm. With Roswell, you've got dozens. Mm-hmm. Like you've got a lot of witnesses at Roswell. Mm-hmm. Roswell was big. Everyone in Roswell knew about this thing. Aztec, I don't think so. Mm-hmm. It was much more concealed because it was actually not in the town of Aztec. It was in a place like 10, 15 miles over called Hart Canyon, which was much more remote.
Sure.
So I think...
for a 100-foot craft...
Actually, Roswell was remote too, when you think about it.
But a 100-foot craft, this is a massive thing.
Yeah, transporting it out there, But anyway, I think that happened. I think that was the real deal. There was a event in Kingman, Arizona, another southwestern case from 1953. And that one was rumored to be taken actually to what became Area 51. It was a very involved transportation of that craft over a lot of terrain to get it to Nevada where it needed to be studied. I think there was one that came down near Las Vegas in 1962. And I think there's been a number that are not in the United States that the U.S. acquired. I think there was one on the border of Bolivia and Paraguay or Peru, Bolivia, in 1978, more recently. I think that U.S. went in and took over that whole operation. There's one in South America, again, in 1997, and the guy who was the witness for that, named Weygand, has just recently come out of the woodwork, and I think he's talking to people. I would like to connect with him.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm familiar with the Varginha,
in Brazil, 1996.
Yeah, that one seems significant to me. Would you mind explaining the details of that?
That one was tracked by Brazil's military. Of course, U.S. is always involved in these things. A craft went down, and a live alien being supposedly was seen by townspeople. Again, these were young people in their teens, and they said what they saw, like huddled in a corner in this town, like this alien with red eyes, kind of superficially would resemble a gray alien, kind of a large head with large eyes, but not. It was not a gray alien. It was something very different, according to their description. I do know that there were reports of a hospital in the city there that supposedly had the being. I mean, I know that there are rumors of this sort.
Again, you just need to watch Moment of Contact, James Fox's documentary. Just phenomenal documentary. And again, I've got a clip we're going to show at the end here of my interview with James Fox about that film. It's pretty much what got me into this whole topic, guys, to be honest with you, was that interview. Sort of took me over the edge of like, okay, there's something here. So anyway, let's there's not much more to this clip. Anyway, look, I'm going to put a link to the full interview here. It's over 4 hours. Again, check it out. Richard Dolan, great interview. And a great new podcast, Camp Gagnon, or Gagnon. God, I'm not saying that right. Anyway, let's start with these. All right, number one. Let's go in order of date, all right? Cape Girardeau, 1941. Right here. All right, there's lots of articles and stuff about each particular one, and it's kind of interesting to see how much information is out there about each one of these and where you find the information on what kind of sites and that sort of thing, how many podcasts are made, how many documentaries, do they have an IMDb, a Wikipedia, like these sort of things. You start to see which ones are more developed out there on the internet and others that are not, and so that's interesting. And they're all roughly about the same, to be honest with you. So anyway, okay. Cape Girardeau UFO, 1941. Let's just jump in. Look, there's some, we're going to be looking at some picture illustrations from Michael Huntington, who is a local travel writer and UFO researcher. All right. So the incident is infamously known as humans' first encounter with aliens. However, that may not be the case. They're talking about Roswell. So 6 years before the supposed Roswell UFO incident, Reverend William Huffman from the Red Star Baptist Church was called by the sheriff around 9:30 p.m. and taken to the scene of an accident so he could read the victims their last rites. And here's an illustration of the UFO crash and 3 alien bodies said to be found in a field of Cape Girardeau in 1941. So this one looks alive. These 2 dead. Crashed UFO. Look how it's just like diagonally in it, like it literally just fell into it. According to Michael Huntington, local travel writer and UFO researcher, Huffman found himself praying over 3 extraterrestrial beings after their flying saucer struck ground in a rural Cape Girardeau field. The story of the UFO crash in Cape Girardeau has been long researched since the 1980s, when Charlotte Mann, a former Cape Girardeau resident, told a story about what her grandfather experienced 40 years prior. According to Huntington, Huffman was taken to a field where a group of firemen, police officers, and eventually the military were taking over the scene. All right, so this is an illustration of the alien body said to be found in a field. Wow, these are really not good illustrations. I mean, what is stick figures? I guess those little lines are the hats, so they're just like holding this alien out. Here, read him his last rites. Appears to be 4 feet tall. Anyway. Quote, upon arrival, it was a very different situation. It was not a conventional aircraft as we know it. He described it as a saucer that was metallic in color, no seams, did not look like anything he had ever seen. It had been broken up in one portion, and so he could walk up and see that, Mann said in a TV documentary about the crash. The crash did not feature the UFO, though. There were also... the craft did not just feature the UFO, though. Quote, there were also some bodies, 3 gray alien-type beings, about 5 feet tall, big heads, and big black eyes, Huntington said. So right here it says about 4 feet tall. And here it says 5 feet tall. Just saying. Then there's a, looks like a memorandum here from Washington, Director of FBI, March 22, 1950. It says an investigator for the Air Force stated that 3 so-called flying saucers had been recovered in New Mexico. 3. They were described as being circular in shape with raised something appropriate 50 feet in diameter. Each one was occupied by 3 bodies of human shape, but only 3 feet tall. So there they put 3 feet tall. Dressed in metallic cloth of a very fine texture, each body was something in a manner similar to the blackout suits used by something flyers and test pilots. That's interesting. There were said to be 3 aliens. 2 were dead, but 1 seemed to be alive. That is the one Huffman performed his duties on first. When Huffman was finished, he was sworn to secrecy by the military personnel who had taken over the area. According to UFO casebook files, with the United States on the verge of entering World War II, everyone on the site was sworn to secrecy as a concern for national security. Not only were eyewitnesses sworn to secrecy, but research leads to believe that the military also removed all evidence it ever happened. Okay. So anyway, I'll put a link to this. You guys can find out more about it. That's interesting. We got more to cover. All right, Roswell, New Mexico, right? That's the big one. Roswell, New Mexico, 1947. I think we all know about that, right? The Roswell incident, or simply Roswell, was the July 1947 recovery of metallic and rubber debris from a crashed military balloon by Roswell Army airfield personnel who issued a press release announcing possession of a flying disc. Decades later, conspiracy theories claimed that debris from an alien spaceship had been covered up by the government. In response, in 1994, the United States Air Force published a report concluding the crashed object was a top-secret nuclear test surveillance balloon from Project Mogul. So, the Roswell incident took place during the flying disc craze of 1947, sparked by widespread media coverage of pilot Kenneth Arnold's alleged sighting. So just saying, this is interesting, right? 1947, Roswell, we all know about that. There's the famous picture, right, with Jesse Marcel holding foil debris that they said is from Project Mogul. Here's another one. Right, here they are like, yeah, this is it. This is what we said was a flying saucer. Interesting. Crash disc hoaxes. Twin Falls, Aztec. Ooh. Interesting. All right, let's get to the Aztec one. Aztec, New Mexico, 1948. So, the Aztec, New Mexico UFO hoax, sometimes known as, the other Roswell. All right. So this was a flying saucer crash alleged to have happened in 1948 in Aztec, New Mexico. Of course, as Richard Dolan stated in that video, it happened just outside of Aztec, New Mexico. The story was first published in 1949 by author Frank Scully in his Variety magazine columns and later in his 1950 book, Behind the Flying Saucers. In the mid-1950s, the story was exposed as a hoax fabricated by two con men, Silas M. Newton and Leo A. Jabbar, as part of a fraudulent scheme to sell supposed alien technology. Beginning in the 1970s, some ufologists resurrected the story in books claiming the purported crash was real. In 2013, an FBI memo claimed by some ufologists to substantiate the crash story was dismissed by the Bureau as a second or third-hand claim that we never investigated. So the story goes, according to Scully, in March 1948, an unidentified aerial craft containing 16 humanoid bodies was recovered by the military in New Mexico after making a controlled landing in Hart Canyon, 12 miles northeast of the city of Aztec. The craft was said to be 99 feet in diameter, the largest UFO to date. Scully named as his sources two men identified as Newton and Jabbar, who reportedly told him the incident had been covered up and the military had taken the craft for secret research. Scully wrote that the crashed UFO, along with other flying saucers captured by the government, came from Venus and worked on magnetic principles. According to Scully, the inhabitants stocked concentrated food wafers and heavy water for drinking purposes. What? And every dimension of the craft was divisible by 9. Okay. Science writer Martin Gardner criticized Scully's story as full of wild imaginings and scientific howlers. Hoax. During the late 1940s and early 50s, Silas Newton and Leo A. Jabbar traveled through Aztec attempting to sell devices known in the oil business as doodle bugs. They claimed that these devices could find oil, gas, and gold, and that they could do so because they were based on alien technology recovered from the supposed crash of a flying saucer. When J.P. Kahn of the San Francisco Chronicle asked the con men for a piece of metal from the supposed alien devices, they provided him with a sample that turned out to be ordinary aluminum. In 1949, author Frank Scully published a series of columns in Variety magazine retelling the crash story told to him by Newton and Jabbar. He later expanded these columns to create Behind the Flying Saucers in 1950, a best-selling book that influenced public perceptions about UFOs. 2 years later, in 1952, the hoax was exposed in True magazine, with a follow-up article in 1956 presenting other victims of Newton and Jabbar. One of the victims was a millionaire, Herman Flater, who pressed charges. The two were convicted of fraud in 1953. So that's interesting. I don't know what y'all think about that. That's just some details. So this is about the Aztec crash. Listen to what Jesse Michaels, who interviewed David Grush, right? He's on the Theories of Everything podcast with Kurt Jaimungal. And I've covered this in a video, but this is quite interesting what he says about Oppenheimer and this Aztec crash. Listen to this.
But there is a lot of interesting stuff around Oppenheimer. So there's a book by a guy named William Steinman called UFO Crash that claims that Robert Oppenheimer was on a cleanup crew, a UFO crash cleanup crew in Aztec, New Mexico, March of 1948, a year after Roswell, with Townsend Brown, among a few others. And so again,
So that's 1948, right? Aztec, New Mexico. That's interesting. So if it was a hoax, what about this book? Does Jesse Michaels know about these two guys? That's all very interesting. Doesn't mean it's a hoax, right? But it is interesting that the two guys that told Scully about it later get convicted of fraud. They sell stuff, right, that's fraudulent. They're going around selling devices saying it's made from alien technology. Clearly not. They turn over a sample that's just regular aluminum. I mean, look, we have to take it all into consideration, right? Some crashes are just going to be BS, and some will be real, right? That one seems fishy. But it is interesting, this about Oppenheimer potentially being part of that cleanup crew. That's interesting. All right, next crash. Let's go. Kingman, Arizona, 1953. Ooh. All right, here we go. Again, I'll put links to all of this, okay? All right, key points. UFO believers say a lesser-known 1953 crash near Kingman rivals in impact with Roswell, New Mexico. A researcher says government officials sent a team of about 40 scientists to the crash site. Metallurgist Leonard Stringfield said the craft was made of material not from Earth. Okay. So, a 1947 Roswell, New Mexico event involving little green men and unidentified flying objects may garner most of the extraterrestrial storylines, but believers say a lesser-known 1953 crash in the desert near Kingman rivals in scale, historic impact, and X-Files intrigue, if you believe in such things. We do. Quote, Arizona has at least a half a dozen UFO crash retrieval type events, and the Kingman crash is by far the most famous and best verified, says researcher Preston Dennett, author of UFOs over Arizona, A True History of Extraterrestrial Encounters in the Grand Canyon State. Quote, in fact, it is one of the best verified UFO crashes in the United States, definitely in the top 10. Interesting, but there's at least a half dozen more? Crash details. Dennett says the UFO crashed May 21st, 1953, about 8 miles northeast of the Kingman Airport, and that government officials sent a team of about 40 scientists to the crash site to investigate. The object was described as metallic, 30 feet wide and 3.5 feet high, oval shape with portholes, he says. Inside were 2 to 4 4-foot-tall humanoids, deceased according to most sources, with large eyes and wearing metallic suits. The object was quickly scooped up and taken to either Area 51 Air Base in Nevada or Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, Dennett says. Among the scientists assisting in the recovery was engineer Arthur Stansel, Dennett writes in UFOs over Arizona. After making measurements and studying the crash site, Stansel concluded that the craft struck the ground at 1,200 miles per hour, but was strangely undamaged and definitely not human-made. The quote, the object was not built by anything, obviously, that we know about on Earth, Stansel says. It was more like a teardrop-shaped cigar, like a streamlined cigar. Not from Earth, okay? Metallurgist Leonard Stringfield was also on scene, and after spending 2 days analyzing the craft and materials, concluded that the object was not constructed on Earth. Next to the spacecraft was a tent being guarded by military police, Stansel says. Quote, I managed to glance inside at one point and saw the dead body of a 4-foot human-like creature in a silver metallic suit, he says. The skin on its face was dark brown. This is interesting. I managed to glance inside at one point. What does that even mean? I managed to glance inside at one point. Why would you not glance inside at more than one point? I don't understand. How far away were you? Right? And you just glanced. So, covered up. As you might imagine, the public knew nothing about the Kingman event at the time, which remained covered up for years, Dennett says. Listen to this. The first break in the case came from columnist Frank Scully, whose book Behind the Flying Saucers mentioned the crash, he says. Other researchers soon found additional witnesses. Dennett cites other personnel on site who tell tales of aliens packed in dry ice, ancient Sanskrit-like type, alien interest in copper, and other fantastic tidbits. Whether you believe it or not, there's no denying that the story out of Kingman is out of this world. So, Kingman, Arizona, 1953, right? And this says that the story was, the first break in the case came from columnist Frank Scully, whose book Behind the Flying Saucers mentioned the crash. How's that possible? That book came out in 1950, right? That doesn't make any sense. Right? He later expanded these columns to create Behind the Flying Saucers in 1950, a best-selling book. How did this end up in, this doesn't make sense, right? Well, just expose this. That doesn't make any sense. If it came out in 1953, that crash, and then the book came out in 1950, how could it be mentioned in the book? The crash didn't happen until 1953. Anyway, just some things that aren't adding up, y'all. Did I miss something? Let me know in the comments. Something weird there. And Scully, that guy keeps coming up. Is he being fed more information? That's a problem with anonymous sources. That's a problem with people just coming and telling you stuff. You know? All right. Number 5, Las Vegas, 1962. Date, April 18th, 1962. Time, between 8:15 and 8:19 p.m. local time, though the incident in its entirety lasted 32 minutes, as the object, tracked by NORAD, crossed a total of 10 states. Location, the incident actually began on the East Coast, first spotted in Oneida, New York, just outside of Syracuse. It crossed 10 states, including Kansas, Colorado, and Utah, before disappearing from Nellis Air Force Base radar at 10,000 feet. Response: the Air Defense Command was alerted after the object was tracked by NORAD. The object apparently landed at one point, confirmed by an Air Force spokesman. During the 42 minutes it was on the ground. Wait, this says 32 minutes. The incident lasted 32 minutes. Anyway, during the 42 minutes it was on the ground, all power was lost from a nearby power station. Power was restored once it left, at which time it was pursued by jet interceptors summoned from Phoenix and Stead Field in Reno, Nevada. Outcome: jets pursued the object until it exploded over the Mesquite Range in Nevada in a brilliant glare that was visible over 5 states. So the object just exploded, okay? Having crossed from the east to the west coast, the object was seen by literally thousands of people. And here's looks like an excerpt from a Las Vegas Sun. Brilliant red explosion flares in Las Vegas sky. Eyewitness accounts. It has been described as a red or blue fireball, a red flaming sword across the sky, an object resembling a tadpole. Like a teardrop? That's interesting. A very bright white light was a smoke trail behind it with 20 to 30 explosions. Witnesses in Utah claimed it was no more than 500 feet above their truck, causing it to nearly stall at the time. According to Captain Herman Gordon Shields, who was interrogated at Hill Air Force Base by Douglas M. Crouch, the chief of the Criminal Investigations Sections, quote, it had a long, slender appearance comparable to a cigarette in size. That is, the diameter with respect to the length of an object. The forepart, or the lower part of the object, was very bright, intense white, such as a magnesium fire. The second half, the aft section, was a clearly distinguishable yellowish color. I would say the object was just about divided in half, the forepart being intensely white, the aft section having a more yellow color to it. So, just saying, this is important and interesting. So, Air Force Intelligence Report, April 24th, 1962, a brilliant mid-air illumination appeared over Nephi, Utah, visible in Idaho, California, Arizona, and Kansas. One violent explosion and 20 to 30 sharp explosions followed illumination. Air Force pilot in area reported clearly defined white object falling toward ground after illumination. So look, there's a lot more here, okay? Long cylindrical shape like a cigarette. At the distant object appeared to be the size of a cigarette. So just saying. Okay, look, I'll put links to all of this so you can check it out. That's interesting. Tracked over multiple states. That's an interesting one. All right, Bolivia. 1978. All right, where are we? Okay. Oh. The most reliable UFO case in South America. Bolivian UFO crash of 1978. One of the forgotten cases of a UFO crash witnessed by thousands of people occurred in Bolivia. All right, Bolivia is in South America. This event caused a stir in the U.S. government. The involvement, of the U.S. State Department and the CIA played an important role in considering the object that fell in Bolivia as something more than space debris or a meteorite. Perhaps this particular case in South America is the most reliable UFO incident. They say that about all of them, don't they? It is estimated that hundreds or perhaps even thousands of people from Tarija, Bolivia, witnessed the fall of a cylindrical UFO with flames on one side over Mount El Tigre in the afternoon of May 6, 1978. The crash was heard 150 miles away from the crash site. In addition, many witnesses reported experiencing a sonic boom that knocked them to the ground and shattered the windows of the houses within a 30-mile radius of the crash site. This incident caused confusion about the origin of the object, which ranged from meteorites to spacecraft and UFOs. And then here's a picture of a newspaper, Lugar de Impacto, that's just saying the site of impact up there in the mountains. You can't see anything in that picture. Since a disaster occurred on the border of Argentina and Bolivia, it worried the governments of both countries. The Argentine authorities have sent a border police unit to investigate the case and search for the wreckage of the object. After listening to eyewitnesses, the police were convinced that the object was a UFO, as most of them said it was cylindrical in shape and metallic in color. Cigar-shaped UFO. Seen a lot of similarities here, right? In these UFO sightings. Cigar-shaped, cigarette-shaped, teardrop, tadpole. According to Argentine media reports, the UFO shook the earth at 16:30, which is just 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon. Police officer Juan Hurtado, who witnessed the crash, called the object a giant tank emitting traces of white smoke. He flew over my head. This is a quote. I was on duty, and at that moment, I was talking to 3 engineers from the mine in La Paz when we saw how the object crashed into Mount El Tigre. The impact was so strong that I was thrown to the ground. At that moment, the earth shook, he said. Moreover, the Bolivian Air Force sent 3 of its planes to search for the crash site. So we received another quote. We received another call from our listeners asking us to confirm reports that an unidentified object fell in the territory of Bolivia near the Argentine border. We can only say that Argentine and Uruguayan radio stations are reporting this even more often, saying that the Bolivian authorities urgently requested help from the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, so NASA, to determine the nature of the object that fell on a hill on Bolivian territory. So the CIA report titled Bolivia's Report Contradicts the Details of the Fallen Object states the following. One of the newspapers in Argentina mentioned the arrival of 2 American military officials, possibly from the Air Force. They were Colonel Robert Simmons and Major John Hayes. The report said that the officers did arrive but were seen in civilian clothes. Some reports claimed that they were ordered to take away a large metal object on a U.S. Air Force Hercules cargo plane. Only 2 years later, the U.S. State Department revealed in 5 declassified documents that Simmons and Hayes, maybe they meant Hayes there, from the U.S. Defense Attaché in La Paz actually arrived in Tarija, acting as part of the Moondust Project. Okay. So I guess this is an illustration. Other reliable witnesses of the event were 2 border guards from the village of Aguas Blancas in Argentina. They saw an oval-shaped object in the sky while attending a football match. At least 500 people, including players, also witnessed this event. According to other eyewitnesses, the cylindrical object had a pointed head and was 4 meters in diameter. It was never possible to find out what actually fell in Bolivia in May 1978, but it was not a meteorite, which was confirmed by the Smithsonian Scientific Event Alert Network. So there you go, folks. Bolivia, 1978. All right, Varginha, Brazil, 1996. Right here, the Varginha UFO incident involves a series of events in 1996 when residents of Varginha, Brazil, claimed seeing one or more strange creatures and at least one identified flying object. Other associated claims include the capture of one or more extraterrestrial beings by the Brazilian authorities, animal fatalities at a zoo, and a woman impregnated by an extraterrestrial. Wow. So here we go. According to media reports, a creature was sighted on the afternoon of January 20th, 1996 by 3 females ranging from 14 to 22 years old. The females described the creature as a large-headed bipedal with spots like veins on the skin and some bumps on the head. Eyes were 2 red balls. The creature, later termed the E.T. de Varginha, seemed to be wobbly or unsteady, and the girls assumed it was injured or sick. They said that they fled and that told their mother that they had seen the devil. Rumors afterward began to spread throughout the area, with some people claiming to have observed UFOs in the days prior. Later claims were made of additional unidentified creatures, extraterrestrials, being collected and observed at a hospital, military, police, government trucks, and personnel being active in the area, and an unidentified animal prowling a local forest. The death of a police officer and unexplained animal deaths occurring in the local zoo. Ufologists would later allege links between these and other claims, including the claim that one of the initial creature witnesses was impregnated by the creature. Now, that is not in the documentary from James Fox, some of these claims. Nothing with the zoo, nothing with this woman, being impregnated by the creature, none of that. It basically taught, he gets the guy that sees the crash of the UFO. Then he interviews the girls that had seen the actual alien. He talks to military personnel who state to have driven, this particular dead body. Supposedly he's trying to get interviews with the doctors that did the autopsies on these, and potentially a video of the autopsy of the beings. So there's supposed to be a part 2 to this documentary, Moment of Contact. But it looks like James Fox is working on something else right now. So this may come later. I mean, this is what he told me last year. This basically this time last year. So let's take a look at a clip from my interview with James Fox about the Varginha incident. And this is how, why he thinks it's real.
At that point, 2013, 2014. Marco Leal, my co-producer, partner, gets an interview with a guy named Jose Carlos Pereira. He's a brigadier general, Air Force. And he agrees to talk about UFOs in Brazil. It's on camera. He says, but don't talk about Varginha. If you talk about Varginha, this interview's over. Jesus, okay, really? He was serious. So we didn't. We promised him that we wouldn't. Otherwise, he wasn't going to go on camera.
Yeah.
This is 2013. I know I just said that. 2013, 2014 at the latest. At the end of it, cameras were off. I came up to Jose Carlos Pereira and I begged him and I promised him on my life that there were no cameras and no recording devices rolling. And I said, please. And Marco did too. Please, please, please tell us about Varginha. Please, we want to know. And he was getting in the back of his, he had a driver waiting for him, and he was getting back in the car. I think he sat down in the seat, and he looked at us, and he said, it happened. And he closed the door, and off he drove. Wow. And so I had that level of validation early on in production, where I just simply can't imagine why he would lie to us.
Sure.
He wouldn't talk about it on camera. He didn't want to make any comments on it. We begged him. I'm not kidding you. When I tell you I was on my hands and knees begging, I was. And so was Marco. We looked him in the eyes. We were begging him, please, just tell us so we know. The reason why I'm sharing this story now is he died a few years later. But I knew that. So I had that confirmation from a brigadier, Air Force, Brazilian, very high level, early on. And so that kind of was my driving force. That little moment kept us going, kept Marco and I going, that this case really did happen. Of course, we uncovered, it took years, but we uncovered more evidence on this case in the history of the case, unequivocally. It's going to rattle.
It's going to rattle what you put together. Oh, yeah, what you put together is honestly magnificent. It starts with a bang, and you don't think it can, at least in my, it's like, how can this go like even crazier? And it just does. But in just such a compelling way. I really got to say, you really present. Yeah, the film, look at me, guys, shorter hair, Patrick. Yeah, the film is phenomenal. Anything James Fox puts out, I'm a huge fan of. Again, whether you agree with it or not, he just presents it in a way that's entertaining and interesting. And I mean, honestly, the way he cuts things, like he could make me believe the earth is flat. It does a really great job. So anyway, that's really cool. So I'll put a link to this so you can watch the full interview if you want. My interview with James Fox from last year about Moment of Contact on my other channel, Lone Star Plate. All right, let's jump to this last one. Peru, 1997. Jonathan Wygant. All right. This one right here, he has come out. This is an older interview, okay, from 2001. But he has come out recently and done more interviews like this year. So this is I couldn't find too much information about it, to be honest with you, besides his testimony. So let's just get a little bit, about what happened. Peru, 1997. Say, shot down UFO. Right? Let's see.
I don't know, 3 or 4 in the morning and headed out in Humvees. We had about 5 or 6 Hummers, and we drove to where we needed to go, and then from there, we had to hump.
So Lance Corporal Jonathan Wygant, okay, his testimony on the shot down UFO which crashed in Peru, 1997.
Through the bush. So we got there, I don't know, 6, 7, just when daylight had just started to get light. And we found the area really easy because there was a huge gash in the land where something had crashed, and it didn't break anything. I don't know if you've ever been to a crash site where you had trees just broken like.
I don't know if you ever been to a crash site, like he's saying that to people, right? Like, you ever been to you've been to these crash sites, you know what I'm talking about. No, we don't know what you're talking about, Jonathan. Very interesting way of presenting that, saying that.
Everything was burned, and it was like if you had almost cut like a warm butter with a knife. I mean, it was just, it's like something on fire or had or some kind of energy, like a laser almost had like gutted. I mean, it was really strange. And anyway, I was in the front with Sergeant Allen and Sergeant Atkins. We were up front, and we were point basically, and we were like, I don't know, 10, 20 meters ahead of everyone else. We all had maps and radios and compasses, so we knew so we wouldn't get lost. And basically, we were the first ones to see the object. And basically, what happened is we didn't go straight up the hill, because basically this thing went up the hill and then off into the side of the ravine or the ridge. This is about a 200-foot ridge at least. Solid granite. I mean, it's rock. I don't know if it's granite. It was buried in the side of the cliff. But anyway, we didn't go straight up. We went on to the left and walked up to the top of the ridge. And that's when we saw the craft. This is a huge ship, and I used to be into sci-fi movies when I was a kid, but this is nothing like I'd ever seen. And when I first saw it, I was scared. It scared the heck out of me. I didn't know what to do, and it was just it was really confusing. So we all climbed down, and it was buried for about a 45-degree angle and into the side of the side of the cliff there, the ridge. And I mean, this is a steep cliff. I mean, it's straight up and down, and it was dripping this like syrup viscosity, this liquid. It was everywhere, all down, everywhere when we went down there, because there was plants and everything. And it was weird. It was a purplish green color, and it was a greenish purple. And
So there's a UFO at a 45-degree angle crashed into a cliff, just dripping ooze off of it, is what he's describing, right? Just boom, stuck in the side of a cliff, like this, just stuck in there. All right, and it's just dripping ooze out of it, I guess.
Kind of like fluctuated, like you couldn't really, when you'd look at it one time, then you'd look at it again, and it would it's almost like it. I don't know if it was like alive and it was just changing, but every time you looked at it, you saw a different shade of greenish purple. It was strange. There was one light on it that slowly went around, and the machine.
Have you ever heard of a greenish purple ooze coming off of any crash on any, UFO sighting? That's new. I've never heard of that before on any other crashes.
Hear it. I could hear, I guess because it was still functioning, and it had like a hum to it, like a really bass, like say if you unplugged an amp from a guitar, that kind of, it was really, it was really deep, and it kind of fluctuated, and then finally it just cut off, and everything just seemed to stop, except the colors and the shades, and it was still that way. When I was looking at the craft, it was buried, so I could see the back of it, and there were these large vents. Well, they look like vents, sort of like a fish gill on the back. I couldn't see around the other side, and I'm assuming that it was the same way on the other side. That looked like, I don't know, that could have been used for propulsion. I'm not sure. Again, this liquid that had come out of the ship it got on my camis, and it discolored them and ate them almost like acid. And then it ate some of the skin off, the hair off my arms.
What? It discolored and ate through his clothes and his. If it's eating through clothes, it's not just taking the hair off your skin. It's taking off your skin. Let's be real here. This sounds absolutely deadly.
And and I didn't know that until later on. But basically, when I was down there with the.
You didn't know that till later on? What? That doesn't make any sense. Listen, I'm not saying anything against this guy's testimony, but that just doesn't add up.
Ship, there was 3 holes. And I guess I'd assume that they were hatches, but there's no way to tell. They were not flush with the with the body, the main body of the craft. They're, I don't know, a few inches below. I knew there was one on top because you could slightly see it. I don't know about the other side, but there was another hatch, the same width and diameter or whatever of the top hatch, and it was kind of crooked to the side, and it was half open. And I didn't see any lights or anything coming out of it, but I felt this presence that it's real strange. I guess it was almost like, I think I told Leslie this, I thought the creatures were, they conned me, and it was like weird, and I think they were trying.
When he said Leslie, he's talking about Leslie Kane, so that he told the reporter Leslie Kane, by the way, and she did not report on this.
Communicate with me, like I guess telepathically. It's really weird, and I don't believe in any of that stuff. But anyway, it was, I could hear like, and it was terrible because it kept going, and then it still comes and goes. It's like basically sitting in your car and turning on like an AM station that's not, it's just white noise, and it's turning it up really high. And that's what I heard when I first got in there. This is pretty crude 2-dimensional drawing, but this is jungle here, and this was the craft, and it was embedded in the rock like this. And I'm not sure if this tapered off or how it went, but these right here are the hatches. These 2 objects here. This one was the one that was half open, and you could see into it, but I mean, it was just black. It was like looking into a closet. 10 meters in width and about 20 meters in length. I'm just not sure. That's just an estimate from what I remember. But it was huge. I mean, it was big, man. And it was shaped like almost like between an egg and like a teardrop almost. It was really, it looked really aerodynamic.
Egg,
at least in the
teardrop.
shape, but the closer I was close enough to take out detail on it that it was not just.
You were close enough to look inside the hatch. See, it was like a closet. You saw the green ooze falling on you. How did you see inside the hatch from where it is on the cliff? Like, you know what I mean? I just don't know how that's possible. Like, what angle are you getting at to see that thing? Where are you standing? Right? Let's go back to that picture he drew. So here's the cliff. Where are you standing exactly to see inside of this? Right? And there's beings in there. So anyway, I don't know, guys. There's a lot more to this. Okay, it's a whole interview. You guys can find out more about it and watch it. Again, I'll put links to all of this so you can check it out. All right, guys. Sorry for the long video. It's just one of those, right? So anyway, again, Richard Dolan on Camp Gagnon Podcast. I'll put a link to the full interview so you can watch it. Again, we discussed Cape Girardeau, 1941, Roswell, New Mexico, 1947, Aztec, New Mexico, 1948, Kingman, Arizona, 1953, Las Vegas, Nevada, 1962, Bolivia, 1978, Varginha, Brazil, 1996, and Peru, 1997, as being Richard Dolan is extremely confident that the U.S. has non-human craft from at least 10 retrievals. These are 8 of these 10. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. And curious to hear everyone's comments. Again, other just comments supporting some of these crashes, maybe other crashes that should have been included. Just what do y'all think? What do y'all think of Richard Dolan? You know, so anyway, thank you guys for watching. As always, if you made it this far, hit that like button. Leave a comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Put out a video every day, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, U.S. Yes, every day, 12 p.m. All right, guys, as always, thank you for watching. This is Patrick with Vetted. Remember, every day's a gift. Peace.